Welcome back to Money Exchange. The expectation throughout 2015 has been that the US Federal Reserve and the Bank of England are inching closer to raising interest rates. The consensus amongst traders has been the US Federal Reserve will pull the trigger first and likely before Christmas. But recently, the economic data coming out of the US has disappointed, and the economic indicators out of the UK, including the official unemployment rate this week, has continued to impress. I'm starting to form the view the Bank of England may be the first to raise interest rates, thus keeping the pressure firmly on the pound to rise. So what's the smart money thinking? Joining me from London, from the Stock Exchange, is Paul Lambert, Head of Currency at Insight Investment. So which of the two central banks, in your view, Paul, are likely going to raise rates first?
I think the probability is still that it will be the US Federal Reserve that raises rates first. I think that, you know, the UK is a small open economy, and I think the Bank of England will be reluctant to be seen as the only central bank, you know, in the world of any significance that are raising rates. I think, you know, the other risk, though, is that neither of them end up raising rates in the investable horizon, and I think that's what the market is grappling with at the moment, that idea, and you know, expectations of when they're both going to raise rates are really getting pushed now quite far into the future.
So what are your thoughts on the possibility of them not raising rates at all? Is it well under 50%? Is it 20%, 30%? What's your thoughts, Paul?
So I think they will end up raising rates because, you know, as you mentioned, the strong employment numbers in the UK and even in the US, where we've seen some weaker employment numbers, the employment picture is still quite positive, and we're quite close to both kind of the Bank of England's and the Federal Reserve's estimate of the, you know, the non-accelerating inflationary rate of unemployment. So I think that they will raise rates, but I think what's causing the market concern, and in fact causing the central bank, certainly in the US, a lot of concern, is just about how easily the economy seems to have been blown off track by, you know, a fairly limited tightening in financial conditions.
So the pound recently, since we saw that major pullback on stock markets back in August, has had a real pullback against the yen and obviously the euro. And the euro's been acting as a little bit of a safe haven at the moment as the stock market volatility has been reasonably high. Do you think the pound is cheap between now and Christmas, particularly against the euro and the yen? If we see a stock market rally into Christmas with that Santa Claus rally, are we likely to see the pound rise back up again?
I think what we've seen, you sort of said that the euro has been a safe haven. I think what's been happening is people have been unwinding trade. So the euro was the funding currency, the yen was the funding currency. As you say, we've seen this rise in risk aversion, and we've seen a correction across, you know, lots of markets, you know, not just the stock market but credit markets. People basically have reduced whatever positions they've had. So if we, between now and Christmas, start to put back on some of those positions that we had on before, so using the euro as the funding currency, using the yen as the funding currency again, the two of the majors with the you know, the easiest, loosest monetary policy, then I think in that environment we will see again a reversal back higher in the pound, and we'll see the dollar regain some of its footing, and we'll probably see some of the other, you know, trends that had been established but that have been interrupted also being re-established. So, but you know, it's a big if, you know, if we're going to see that rally or not. I think that you know, the jury is a bit out. I think there's been a relief short term that the Fed aren't raising rates, but you know, I think that the risk is the market starts to question, why isn't the Fed raising rates? You know, is it really positive for risk that US growth is weaker, that economy is seemingly quite fragile? So, you know, I think that there's a lot of things for the market to think about between now and Christmas.
I think the Fed, in my personal view, might have missed the boat. They might have been best doing it a little while ago. But let's move on to the euro and also the Bank of Japan. We've got two central banks potentially about to adjust some monetary policy. The Bank of Japan maybe at the end of this month, and then of course a lot of economists are predicting the ECB will ease policy between now and Christmas. What are your thoughts on the two central banks?
I think the pressure on the Bank of Japan to go is certainly intensifying. I mean, they've been trying to talk up, you know, the outlook for inflation, and they've been trying to suggest that they've done enough, and they've obviously done a great deal. But, you know, the underlying data in Japan still looks fairly soft, and it still looks like a fairly long odds that they're going to hit their inflation target. So I think the pressure for them to deliver more is certainly on, and I think that there's a good chance we will see that as early as their next meeting. In terms of the ECB, it's a slightly more complicated picture, because they kind of told us that they were doing the QE until next summer. And so the question is, at what point do you announce that you might go on for longer? Because I think that the way in which the ECB are likely to ease is in fact that, going on for longer rather than necessarily doing much more, moving rates. I don't think they're likely to move rates. So I think that what the ECB will do is a lot more verbal intervention. I think Mario Draghi will keep up his kind of negative rhetoric and making sure the market understands that they can continue for longer. But I think they'll be more reluctant to actually deliver anything concrete before before next year.
Paul, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
After the break, we'll learn about Bitcoin. Plus, I'll give you the chance to win $1,000 cash with our weekly currency quiz. Don't go away.